Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So did you have a VCR in the home when you were growing up? If you're like me, you grew up right around the time where a video cassette recorder was commonplace in the home. And, well, if you're like me, if your carbonated hormonal prepubescent experience was anything at all like mine, you had a VCR with a worn-out pause button on it. Yeah. Did you do that? Oh, man, there are all these movies with scenes in them that you would try and strategically pause when you were a kid. And man, that pause feature was so jumpy because, you know, it was the 90s and they hadn't sort of perfected that kind of thing. So the pause would jump, or there would be squiggly lines through it, or it'd be super blurry and you wouldn't get a chance to see the things that you wanted to see as a hormonally carbonated prepubescent kid. But occasionally you got it just right and you managed to pause it so you could, so that's what boobs look like. There were certain movies, too. There were certain movies that, well, I got to be an expert with the pause button on. Woman in Red with Kelly LeBrock. You ever see that one? Oh, man. You saw everything. For a teeny tiny second that I managed to pause, you saw absolutely everything. All of her glory. And, man, I paused the living hell out of that video cassette. There are other movies like Porky's and Animal House and things of that nature where there was a certain amount of nudity in it. Plus, I grew up in England. Now, I noticed when I moved to England as a kid that censorship on television was very different in England and America. In America, they were all bent out of shape about the human body. You know, you found that sort of thing, the human body and swear words, those were frequently censored. But you could show all the violence you wanted to on American television. I remember noticing that. Now, in England, they thought the human body in all its forms and the colorful language that people use wasn't that big of a deal, but they really got bothered by violence. English censors really had a problem, I remember, with the A-Team. Did you watch the A-Team growing up? Every single week, there was serious amounts of machine gun related violence in the A-Team, and it was presented in a really unrealistic, cartoonish manner. If you watch the A-Team, you know that every single week the A-Team would be pursued by cops or bad guys or military police because they were soldiers of fortune. That's what they were doing, and they were living underground, and the cops were always after them for some reason or another, and so were the military police. And to get them off their trail, frequently when they were being chased by these folks, the back doors of Mr. T's van would fly open, and out they would all pop with machine guns. They would spray the pursuing car with machine gun fire, and what would happen? Not bloodiness, not explosions. The tires would get blown out. The cars would do multiple flips through the air, and then you would see a scene where a wah-wah style trombone played, and a couple of the bad guys that had been chasing them would crawl out of the cars and go, "Oh, I'm going to feel that in the morning." It was a completely, like I said, unrealistic, cartoonish version of machine gun violence, and English censors went, okay, it's bad enough that this is a kid's show and there's machine guns all over it, but it's really kind of giving kids a vastly different idea of what it's actually like to have a machine gun used on you than it actually is. This is not okay. We need to do something about this. I don't think they ever did do something about this, but there were people that were all bent out of shape about it. So in England, they didn't like violence on TV. In America, they didn't like boobs on TV. And as a kid, I remember going, well, I mean, I'd much rather see the boobs, so I'm happy that I'm here. So they would show these movies on normal broadcast television, and you could record them, as I often did. And, oh man, like I said, there were infinitely pausable scenes in all of these things. The Porky's, the Animal Houses, the Woman in Red, the Blame It on Rio. As a young strip of a lad, that was a big one for me. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you had a similar experience, but whatever the case may be, I watched all that stuff. I paused the living hell out of that stuff, and I was fortunate in that my parents didn't try and shield me from that stuff. I think my parents made a decision when I was young that they wouldn't try and hide the nature of the world from me. They would let me see it, experience it, and come to them with questions. Or often they would monitor what I was watching and go, that's not really the case. Things don't actually work like that. That this is a joke, this is humor, this is whatever it was that is not a realistic depiction of the world. And this is why people might find it funny, or this is why people might find it amusing. But there was one movie which did not have nudity in it, but it caused me to ask some very serious questions. It caused me to ask questions about the Klan, the KKK. And that movie was Blazing Saddles. Do you remember Blazing Saddles? Blazing Saddles was an absolute classic, but it sort of had an important part to do with shaping my worldview and my knowledge of prejudice. And man, its very existence made me very concerned about one thing that has been suggested by a Democratic senator with regard to censorship, which we're going to talk about today.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So if you are like me, you had parents that were kind of sort of easygoing about what you watched on TV. My mom was really big on not watching all that much TV. I had my screen time limited. My mom thought I should be reading or playing outside or doing other things that would be more enriching to a kid than sitting in front of the screen. But during the limited amount of television time I got, my parents, I guess, made the decision that they weren't going to be all bent out of shape about what I was watching. They would much rather see that I was taking in the world and seeing the world for what it was, and would come to them with questions about things that I didn't understand. And there was one movie that made me do that. That was Blazing Saddles. I mean, there are a lot of different things that I saw that I think made me come to my parents with questions, but this one was a big deal because it actually, it introduced me to a concept that I was previously more or less unaware of, and that was real racism. I had never really experienced it. I was hanging out with my mom this past weekend just gone by, and we were visiting my little baby niece, Ellie, and having a great old time. But we were talking, what we were talking about? We were talking about that Mr. Rogers movie, because she loved the fact that I watched Mr. Rogers growing up. She thought it was great. And she was like, did you go see the Mr. Rogers documentary? And I was like, I did. It's fantastic. And I didn't realize, because I was a kid, that he was taking on some serious social issues in his show. And it's amazing to me that this happened in my mother's lifetime. I think it was before I was born. Mr. Rogers was on the air for a long time, but there was that moment where in American history, the idea of black people and white people swimming together in the same pool was a big deal. So freaking ridiculous. And it shows how far we've come. And it shows how disappointingly close some truly archaic ideas are. But there was a scene in that documentary where Mr. Rogers was using a hose and a kiddie pool to put cool water on his feet on a hot day. And his mailman came along, who happened to be black, and he was like, oh, you want to have a seat and get water on your feet too to help cool down on this hot day? And they did. And at the time, that was making a very definite political statement. To kids, it wasn't. It was just presenting it as two guys who were cooling their feet down. And that should be the end of it. And to the kids, it was. But to the rest of the world, it was drawing a line in the sand. And that was an interesting and healthy thing. But I said to my mom, I saw that. And one of the things that I realized about my childhood is you and Dad did a really successful job at raising me without prejudice. I kind of sort of didn't know it existed. I guess I lived in a bubble where you just treated people like people. And she was like, well, it's pretty simple, race, religion, sexuality, gender, all these things. Not one of them should change how you treat other people. And that's how we felt. And that's how we raised you. And we never really had to get out in front of anything. We never really had to stop you from being racist, because there's no reason why a kid would naturally be racist. So you were raised completely not racist, completely not prejudiced. And it was easy. And I was like, do you remember Blazing Saddles? And she didn't remember this, but I did, because it was one of my first experiences of realizing that there was racism in this world. Like I said, I led a bit of a privileged life in that I was raised by people who were in no way, shape, or form prejudiced and who didn't pass any prejudice on to me. But I saw that scene in Blazing Saddles where, man, If you've never seen it before, it's hilarious. And it's hilarious now with the benefit of some hindsight. But at the time, I didn't understand why these guys, Bart and the Waco Kid, had dressed up as ghosts to infiltrate the villain, the villain's gang, rather. And they weren't dressed up as ghosts. They were in KKK robes. And I didn't get it. I was like, what's this? Why are they dressed up as ghosts? And my mom or my dad, I can't remember who it was, but they explained to me like, those aren't ghosts. And I got a lesson in what the KKK was all about. And it was so alien and so foreign to me, but it's part of the way that the world was. And it's part of the way that the world still is. And you know what? You can't shield people from that sort of thing forever. And it was an important learning experience for me seeing that happening on the screen and then talking to my parents about it. But it was a real education seeing that happen in Blazing Saddles. I was introduced to the concept of the KKK. I was introduced to the concept of real racism. And I was introduced to the concept that people had killed in the name of racism and done horrible, awful, terrible, evil things in the name of racism. And, well, when I talked to my parents about it, can open worms everywhere. And they did a really good job at explaining to me exactly what the KK was and why I was so horrible. And I remember asking them, why the hell are they allowed to do this? Like, everybody knows this is wrong. Everybody knows that this is not okay. This shouldn't be allowed. And it was explained to me, well, here's the thing. We have this thing called free speech, which means people get to feel what they want to feel and express themselves. Doesn't matter how ugly, doesn't matter how evil it is. That's a right that all of us have. And it's not always good, and it's not always easy, but it is the best way we've got to go through life. Because once you take that away, you don't have what America is supposed to be all about. If you take away someone's right to their thoughts and take away someone's right to their speech, well, A, it's never going to work, and B, it destroys what makes America awesome. And I remember going, really? And they're like, well, put it to you this way. A movie like Blazing Saddles never could have been made without free speech. And you're enjoying that, aren't you? And we're having this great conversation, and you're learning about the world because of it. And my young mind put this together. And it was a weird way to have it put together, but it's strange. That could be about to be taken away. And the way it's presented is so sneaky, so devious, so underhanded. And the manner in which the idea that free speech could be taken away in America, in media, in television, in all of the above, in radio even, they might be coming after me, was something that is truly chilling. What exactly are we talking about that happened this week? It's chilling stuff, and we'll get into it next.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, like I said, Blazing Saddles, it was a massive part of my evolution as a young person. I mean, first and foremost, I've always thought Mel Brooks was freaking hilarious. Everything from Young Frankenstein to Blazing Saddles and all the stops in between have always made me laugh and laugh hard. But it was that one scene where they dress as Klan members. That was a big eye-opener for me because, fortunately enough, I had these parents that let me watch what I was going to watch and then come to them with the appropriate questions. They didn't sort of have a hands-off attitude toward parenting, but they had a let the kid discover the world and then come to us and ask us about the things that he doesn't understand attitude toward parenting. And one of the things I didn't understand is why these characters in the movie Blazing Saddles were dressed as ghosts. Bart and the Waco Kid dressed as ghosts, except they weren't ghosts, they were Klan members. And man, like I said, can open worms everywhere when I asked my parents about this because they had to explain to me what the Klan was, what the Klan did, why it was funny that a black man was dressed up in Klan robes. And I was horrified to learn of the existence of the Klan. And my parents were very clear and straightforward about the world. And, a lot of people might have thought it was weird to get a lesson in murder. I mean, people call it lynching, but let's call it what it is. Murder that took place as perpetrated by Klansmen that was horrifyingly commonplace, horrifyingly recently. And so when I found out about this, I was like, well, the Klan should be outlawed. The Klan shouldn't be allowed to exist. The Klan shouldn't be a thing. Clearly, the Klan should be illegal. And my dad was like, well, yeah, no. I mean, we all know it's wrong. It's hideously wrong. It's awful. But here's the thing. That is sort of what free speech is about. You're not going to stop them from existing and thinking these things by saying that they can't wear these robes and walk through the streets. And this is freedom that we have. This is freedom that we have because we live in America. This is freedom that we have because we live in England. And this is the thing. If you take that away, not only does it not stop racism from existing, but it also stops people from being able to express themselves freely in movies like Blazing Saddles. And look, we're having a really interesting conversation about a movie that you enjoyed and you're learning about the world. This is why this can't go away. And I was like, oh, well, I kind of see. I sort of understand. So that was my education with free speech and the media when I was a kid. I didn't realize it was an education about free speech and the media, but as it turns out, it really was. And you know what? Because of that, there's always been this fear of censorship. There's always been this fear that free speech is going to be taken away. And, well, it's such a distinctly American thing to have free speech that the idea of it being taken away is, as much as people say, they're coming for your free speech, we all know that's never going to happen. Have you ever been to a country where they don't have free speech, where it's actually illegal to speak ill of elected leaders or royalty? It's a very, very different world from America. And anyone who has been to a country like that where free speech doesn't exist will tell you there's no way they could ever take that from Americans. This is who we are as Americans. This is what we do. We speak freely. And I would have told that person that they were right until this week. Now, what's the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is if there's ever anyone who people have thought wanted to take your free speech from you, in theory, if you observe the stereotypes, that would be the right. I think the last time I remember, and maybe I haven't paid close attention, you could probably think of other instances where people came after free speech, but I think the last time I remember free speech being an issue that was right there in my face was when I was living in New York City, and Giuliani was mayor at the time, I think. And Giuliani wanted this piece of art taken out of a gallery. I can't say the name of it on the air and remain employed, I don't think. But it was a cross placed in a bowl of human urine. And Giuliani went, that's disgusting. That's wrong. That's just horribly offensive to anybody that is vaguely even Judeo-Christian, and that needs to not be in the gallery. And people lost their ever-loving minds. No, Giuliani believes in censoring art and free speech, and that's a slippery slope that we're not walking down. Hell no. And so I think the one person that I ever remember challenging free speech was Rudy Giuliani back in the day. And that would be the stereotype, right? The right wants to take your free speech away. They want to police your thoughts, and they're tough, and they're going to try and tell you what to do and what you can't do. And they're the man, and you got to stick it to them. And that's a stereotype. But I have to say, this might be the most tangible challenge to the idea of free speech that I ever remember happening. And the way it happened was so insidious and so sneaky and so devious and, well, so sort of, we're just going to slip this one by the people that, man, it's a little chilling. It's not a little chilling. It's straight up chilling. And it comes from what happened with Alex Jones a couple weeks ago. You remember we had this long conversation on the show about Alex Jones, and people told me, AD, they're coming for free speech. Alex Jones has been taken off of Apple and Facebook and YouTube, and, well, they're trying to censor him. You might not agree with what he says, but you have to agree with the principle of free speech, and he should be allowed to say it. And I went, you're not going to get an answer you like on this one, but this isn't a free speech issue. This is a free trade issue. All these businesses, they're not run by your elected official. We don't have any say in how Apple conducts business. We don't have any say in how YouTube conducts business or any of the platforms that have done away with Alex Jones. They've decided that it's bad for their business to have this guy on it. It's a platform they created. He's built his home, rather. He's built his media home on rented land. And, well, they can take it away from him whenever they want to. And they just did. Therein lies the freedom part of free trade. And freedom to do business the way you're going to do it, as long as you're not breaking the rules. Or as long as you're not breaking the law, rather. So they get to do what the hell they want to do. But what's interesting is the Democratic senator who's looking to ride the wave of that into something that is, to me, very scary. And if it's not scary to you, let's talk about why I think it is. There's this guy. He's a senator from Oregon, a guy called Ron Wyden. And he said there should be consequences for social media platforms that don't remove content from someone who is a quote-unquote bad actor. And he said that he's working on a bill to punish companies that do not remove content from bad actors because there are, quote, thousands of accounts out there that are just as bad as Alex Jones. He said he's working on something called a privacy bill. Have you heard of this? I don't know if it really has anything to do with privacy, but it's a bill that would punish companies that allow Alex Jones and, quote, other bad actors to remain on their platforms. Now, if you've been following this whole thing, you might know that Alex Jones, I think at this point, is still on Twitter. And by the way, people asking me for an opinion on Alex Jones, I don't have one. And the reason I don't have one is because I don't have time to listen. I'm on like 25 radio stations. Each one has a different boss. Each boss doesn't know anything about what the other boss just asked me to do. So at the end of the day, as much as I would love to listen to the Alex Joneses of this world just to see what the hell is up, I don't have time. So if you're asking me to weigh in on the content of Alex Jones's show, I'm not in a position to do that. But what I can comment on is the idea of free speech and how, well, Facebook are free to have whatever the hell they want to have because, you know, people don't pay for it. It's the invention of one man who decides how it's going to be run. He has no responsibility to us. He's not an elected official. The end. End of story. So Alex Jones, I think, is still on Twitter. And, well, it sounds like the senator, Ron Wyden, wants to go after Twitter and any other social media platform that allows Alex Jones to have a presence. He said, I think what the Alex Jones case shows is that we're going to really be looking at what the consequences are for just leaving common decency in the dust. What I'm going to try to do in my legislation is really lay out what the consequences are when somebody who is a bad actor, somebody who really doesn't meet the decency principles that reflect our values, if that bad actor blows by the bounds of common decency, I think you got to have a way to make sure that that stuff is taken down. Okay. Yeah. Boy, gosh, gee willikers. There's some really vague and nebulous terms there. A bad actor. What the hell is a bad actor? Am I a bad actor? What the hell does that even mean? And common decency. Well, that's not a moving target at all, is it? Look, decency, common or not, is all in the eyes and the ears and the mind of the beholder. The idea that a governing body is going to lay down a law of decency, that's, well, I'm not trying to be overly dramatic with this sort of thing. That's sort of thought policing. And you know what? The people that were coming at me going, man, they're taking Alex Jones down. This is the beginning of the end of free speech. And I have to admit to you, I said, no, it's not. This is just Facebook doing what it is their right to do. They don't want to be associated with Alex Jones. End of story. And what Facebook did was not the end of free speech. But on the back of that, from the momentum of that, what Ron Wyden is trying to do is a very direct attack on the free speech of Americans. Look, we live in a world where we're lucky enough to live in a free country. It's not consequence free, but it is a free country. We get to say things that we want to say. We get to think things we want to think, and we get to express them in a way that we're going to express them. And then, you know what? We got to deal with the blowback. I don't know what Alex Jones said to get him taken off all these platforms, but he said it. And you know what? Now he has to deal with the consequence of it. In a beautiful American free market kind of way, he made his bed, and now he's been forced to lie in it. But the idea that there's going to be a governing body that decides what is decent and what's not, what meets the principle of decency and what doesn't, that's genuinely scary stuff. That is a direct attack on not only free speech, but the idea of free thought. If you have a thought and it flies against the government definition of common decency, does that make you a criminal? Kind of, sort of. I mean, if you say it out loud, oh man, you're blowing by the bounds of common decency, and there has to be a punishment. There has to be a consequence. There has to be a government-mandated consequence for what you think. And the more you think about this, the more you think about the concept of the government regulating what can or cannot be said on social media, the more you think about the government regulating the idea of what is and isn't okay, the further and further away you get from the concept of America, the further and further away you get from the concept of individual liberty, the further you get from the idea of freedom and democracy, neither of which are clean-cut, easy things to deal with. Democracy is messy. Every person having a vote is messy. You say that people shouldn't be allowed to parade up and down the streets wearing Klan robes? Well, guess what? They get to. You say that those people shouldn't be allowed to have a vote? Guess what? They get to. That's America. And it's ugly, but it's also beautiful. And it's what makes us us. The day that we lose that is a day that I would have told you before this week is a day that would never come. But it's also the day that we lose what it is to be intrinsically American. And it's a day that Democratic Senator Ron Wyden is pushing and pushing hard. Not only saying that the government should decide what decency is or is not, but also saying that there need to be consequences and punishments for people that don't help the government uphold that standard of decency. It's a little insane when you stop and think about it. And the fact that there are so many people going, yeah, that's right. That's right. We agree with this, is a scary and frightening and lemming-like thing in America and must be resisted at all costs. And plus, let's just be freaking real here. As much as it's a terrifying concept to think that a government official might elect themselves to decide which one of your thoughts was decent and whether or not it was okay for you to express them through the written word or speaking them out loud. As much as that's a terrifying thought and signifies that people are genuinely coming for your freedom, this has absolutely nothing to do with decency. This is just a self-serving attempt to silence political opponents.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD again. Nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you a musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD again. Nobody rock a body better than me.
So, this is an unbelievably weird one. Did you see that? Oh, gosh. Did you see that there's a new way in which people are relaxing? I got to tell you, for me, constantly hearing about all the crimes happening around me, this is a stressful thing. This does not lead to me feeling like I should be taking it easy. This does not lead to me catching 40 winks easier than I previously did when I heard about all the crime that was happening in my neighborhood. Does that make me the weird one? Apparently it does, because, well, I guess the hot new way people are relaxing is listening to the live police scanner played over music. Yeah, there's a website called areyoulistening.to that picks a music track, a city's police radio, and then mashes them up. I'll say this, it does become kind of hypnotic hearing the dispatcher's monotone voice played over slow ambient music, but relaxing, I don't know. What do you think?
97.5 SL 97, come in. 36.
Negative. Did you give me code 61435 Del Amo, please?
Code 61435 Del Amo.
32 shows on a traffic stop on Crenshaw south of 63. Lincoln, Adam, David, Ida, David, Edward, Edward.
Yeah, there you have it. Is that relaxing to you? For me, it sounds sort of like you're watching the beginning of a documentary. Like that's the audio from the opening scene of a hard-hitting, informative piece of film that lets you know that police dispatchers have it harder than you think they previously had it, or something like that. But yeah, if that in any way, shape, or form is relaxing to you, you are listening.to is where you can hear all sorts of that kind of thing. Oh man, did you? This is an interesting one. I would not take any kind of athletic coaching or fitness advice from the folks that have anything to do with the front office or inner workings of the Cleveland Browns. A winning record they do not have. But did you see that Cleveland Browns offensive line coach Bob Wiley recently went off about the idea of stretching on the latest episode of Hard Knocks? Yeah, he says that stretching is overrated and the guys who stormed the beaches of Normandy weren't worried about it.
Stretch is way overrated. Did you know World War I, World War II, all those guys that fought in that war, they did push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, climbed the rope and ran. But none of this fancy okay? Right? And they won 2 world wars. 2 world wars by doing jumping jacks, push-ups, and sit-ups. 2 world wars. You think they were worried when they're running across Normandy about stretching? Are you kidding me?
A few people might have pulled a hammy.
Well, let me see. Give me my rubber band so I can stretch to run across that beach. You gotta be kidding me.
So yeah, apparently Browns offensive line coach Bob Wiley not so much into stretching, which I guess means he'd probably listen to ambient music with police scanners in it as a manner of relaxation before he ever turned to something like yoga. Yoga's actually not supposed to be that good for you anymore. Well, no, correction. Yoga's supposed to be excellent for you. Yoga's supposed to have a myriad of physical benefits. But apparently yoga doesn't necessarily constitute exercise. I don't know what you would call it. Maybe it's a form of therapy. Maybe it's good for your central nervous system. Maybe it's good for your circulatory system. Maybe it's good for all these sorts of things. And to me, that would verge on being exercise. But doctors are now saying that yoga, not so much exercise. It says apparently doctors are saying that yoga doesn't burn anywhere near enough calories to constitute a workout. So there you have it. I don't know. You know what's weird though? Like lifting weights, like really heavy physical weightlifting, doesn't burn that many calories either. And I think this is what they're basing it on, whether or not it burns calories and therefore whether or not it counts as exercise. But yeah, lifting weights doesn't really burn. I think if you look at it, I'm not like gym guy or workout dude or anything like that, but I think that like if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to be in what do they call it, a caloric deficit where you're burning more calories than you eat. If you have like a slice of cake and go, oh man, I got to work that slice of cake off, what you should do is, I guess, go for a walk or be on an exercise bike or a treadmill or elliptical or something like that. If you go, I had a slice of cake and I got to go burn that off, going to the gym and squatting heavy amounts of weight isn't going to burn off the cake in the same way that the cardio will. So I guess by that definition, yoga, stretching, all of the above doesn't necessarily qualify as exercise. That said, any sort of physical or athletic advice that you're looking for out there, I would think long and hard before you take anything that anyone associated with the Cleveland Browns says to you about fitness, health, and for that matter, winning at anything. Now, look, obviously, he's an offensive line coach in the NFL. He knows way more about this than I ever will. But, proof is in the pudding. And if pudding is wins, well, the Cleveland Browns don't have a whole lot of pudding. And perhaps they should be looking at doing some stretches. I've wished my grandfather was still alive for many, many reasons. I miss the guy a lot. He died when I was fairly young. I was living in a different country at the time, so I kind of got what I felt at the time was shortchanged on a relationship with a man who I loved and a man who was awesome to me and a man who'd done some amazing things and had some incredible things to share with me. I've wished he was alive many times, but I've never once wished he was alive so I could check on the calisthenics routine he took on before he stormed the beaches at Normandy. Oh, well.
Stretch is way overrated. Did you know World War I, World War II, all those guys that fought in that war, they did push-ups, jumping jacks, sit-ups, climbed the rope and ran. But none of this fancy okay? Right? And they won 2 world wars. 2 world wars by doing jumping jacks, push-ups, and sit-ups. 2 world wars. You think they were worried when they're running across Normandy about stretching? Are you kidding me? Huh? Well, let me see. Give me my rubber band so I can stretch to run across that beach. You gotta be kidding me.
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The Dumbing Up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So, it's difficult to say what the Oakland Raiders fan base is going to be like after the team moves to Las Vegas in the year 2020. But apparently Vegas is expecting and preparing for the worst. Now, let's be real here. The Raiders and their fans have a bit of a reputation. And, well, it looks like I said, Vegas is ready for that. What exactly do we mean? How are they preparing for the worst in Las Vegas with regard to the arrival of the Raiders in the year 2020? We'll get into it a little after we roll through the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. Because you and I tackle big and important issues around here, let's start off with the pressing news story that Kirstie Alley recently claimed that she met Prince Charles at Courtney Love's house. Yeah, it's true. Kirstie Alley, she's on the British version of Celebrity Big Brother, and she dropped a pretty startling claim that she met Prince Charles once when she was chilling at Courtney Love's house. She said, quote, "I'm friends with Courtney Love, and one time she asked me to dinner, and when I came, what's his name? Oh my God, Elton John was at dinner, and there were only 4 of us. Then another time she asked me over to her house for snacks, and Prince Charles was there." Yes, apparently Prince Charles, according to Kirstie Alley, went over to Courtney Love's house for snacks. Prince Charles hasn't commented. Possibly because, he's on the couch, sandwiched between Courtney Love and Billy Corgan, sharing a can of Pringles. That sounds likely. Anyways, naturally, people, especially people in England, are finding this a little difficult to believe. One person tweeted, quote, "I'm sorry, but Prince Charles has not been to Courtney Love's house." And another said, quote, "Where's the fan fiction about Courtney Love and Prince Charles eating snacks?" Yeah. The show, and this is sort of depressing, the show also posted a clip the other day of Kirstie talking about being hooked on cocaine for 4 years. She said that she finally realized how far she'd sunk after snorting coke while babysitting her young niece and her young nephew. Yes, but there you have it. Courtney Love apparently hosted Prince Charles once, and Kirstie Alley went over for dinner and met him there. Oh wait, no, sorry, snacks. New levels of incredulity discovered every single day. Hey, have you ever gotten busy in a car? Apparently, most of the people who do get busy in a car are a specific type of person. And it's not the type of person that you would think. A new survey found that most of the people who have had sex in a car are couples in long-term relationships that are looking to spice things up. you're getting to that point in your relationship where you're trying to go, how am I going to find this interesting? I'm trying to remember the last time I opened up a door in my home and you weren't the one behind it. What are we going to do to make this more entertaining for the both of us? Oh, I know. We can get busy in the car. Yeah, you'd think it was wild, crazy, adventurous types, but no. It's couples in long-term relationships that are the ones having all the car sex, according to a new study. Well, I mean, obviously it's not all couples in long-term relationships having the car sex. Some folks, I guess, were probably just really eager to improve their Uber rating. Yeah. Here are the most common things, this is also in the story, that make us take our eyes off the road. Handing somebody something in the passenger seat, singing along to the radio at the top of your lungs, tossing something in the back seat, handing something to someone in the back seat. Kids are a big culprit there. Eating while driving, answering a phone call, making a phone call, struggling to take off your coat or a sweater. Oh, that's impossible. You got to pull over to do that. People really try and take off a coat or a sweater while they're driving underneath the seatbelt. That never ends well. Checking your hair or makeup in the mirror, checking your GPS. Somehow texting is way down in 13th place, which is good news. Also, checking social media was in 18th place. So it seems like people are doing that less, which is good for all of us who are on the road. So if you decide to marry a much older or much younger person, far be it from me to judge. That said, this might be the story of the biggest age gap I've ever heard of in a relationship. Did you hear which celebrity is marrying someone 40 years younger than him? It's 63-year-old Jermaine Jackson. Yeah, Michael Jackson's brother, member of the Jackson 5, a guy who made many records that many of us grew up listening to. 63-year-old Jermaine Jackson is getting married to a woman who is 23. And, you know, on the surface of things, it doesn't sound like the relationship is going to end well. Even if the relationship goes well, it won't end well. It'll end with him dying many, many years before she does. But I suppose when you think about it objectively, there are good reasons for a younger woman, a woman who's like 23 years old, to be with a man who's 63. For example, when you date an older man like that, he can buy you nice things with his bingo winnings. You still have a lot of time in your day left after dinner, only because the date will be over by 4:30. And finally, one of the many benefits of dating an older man is that he's never going to post embarrassing pictures of you to Instagram, mostly because he doesn't know how. Hey, so do you watch a lot of adult cinema? This is an interesting one. Do you spend a significant amount of your time looking at videos of online naughtiness? To be blunt, do you watch a lot of porn? Because here's the thing. Science has recently determined that if you do watch a lot of porn, it says something interesting about the type of person that you are. Yeah, what personality trait do people, specifically men who watch a lot of porn, have? Well, according to a new study, men who watch a lot of pornography tend to be much, much lazier. Yeah, according to a new study, men who watch an excessive amount of pornography tend to be lazier. I can't tell you why that is, only because I couldn't be bothered to read to the end of the story. Experts on reproductive health. This is a fascinating concept. Experts on reproductive health are now saying it's basically already possible for men to get pregnant. Yeah, experts on reproductive health say it's basically possible for men to get pregnant. Hey, most guys already have the stomach for it. Might as well put the real estate to good use. And you know what? If you visited a public pool, beach, or water park over the summer, you know that it's already also possible for most men to breastfeed. Hey, did you hear what some U.S. cities have been doing about summer water shortages? It's been a legendarily hot one this year, all over the country. And, well, because of that, there have been water shortages. And to cope with it, many cities have been doing something that is pretty unspeakable, or at least they've been drinking something that's pretty unspeakable. Maybe your city did it. I don't know. It depends where you're listening. But yeah, cities have begun using toilet water for drinking. Yeah, due to water shortages in America because of the exceptionally hot summers of the past couple of years, some cities in America are now using toilet water for drinking. I believe these cities made the decision after consulting the foremost expert on the issue, your dog. Hey, question for you. If your phone was lost or if it was stolen, what would you be the most concerned about? I mean, let's be real here. It's 2018, and a lot of people have everything from bank details to special adult photographs of themselves on their phones. So what sensitive information would you be more worried about being made public? Only because new study finds that, well, Americans have interesting priorities when it comes to nudity and financial information. A survey found that most people would rather have nude photos of themselves released than their bank account information. Yeah, survey finds that most people would rather have nude photos of them released than their bank account information. Nah, to me it doesn't matter. Only because, sadly, the word insufficient is the key in both. So, question for you. Do you worry about there being weed killer in your cereal? Apparently, you should. According to some new studies and some experts have gone on the record saying you should be worried that there's weed killer in your cereal, or even worse, your kid's cereal, especially in one specific type of cereal that, honestly, if you're like me, you eat pretty much every single day. Experts tested cereals and found that most of the cereals made with oats, which, by the way, is like all of them, contain a weed killer found in products like Roundup. Yeah. Here's the thing. Cereal makers are quick to get out in front of it, saying that the amount of weed killer in the cereal doesn't pose any real danger, and the idea that you have to be concerned about weed killer in your cereal is, well, quite frankly, flake news. Or, alternative flax. All right, how much time do we have left? Let's talk about what the Raiders are planning on doing when they move to Vegas in the year 2020, or at least what the folks in Vegas are planning on doing about the Raiders and their fans in 2020. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what the Oakland Raiders fan base is going to be like after the team moves to Las Vegas in the year 2020. But, let's be real here. The Raiders fan base, doesn't matter which city they've been in, has always had a bit of a checkered reputation. And apparently, the folks in Vegas are preparing for the worst. Vegas is apparently expecting the fans to continue to be the hooligans of the NFL. According to Las Vegas locally, the Raiders' brand new stadium is going to feature retractable doors, a glass-domed roof, a grass field, and, quote, a small jail and courtroom for unruly fans. Yeah. Not only is there going to be like a sin bin for fans, not only is there going to be a place where you can get banished to if you misbehave as a fan of the Raiders, there's also going to be a courtroom there. Yeah. And that, my friend, that's just the start. The stadium will have its own area command with dedicated officers. Now, if you spent much time in Vegas, this is a lot like the Las Vegas Strip, and the cops are planning on making examples of rowdy fans from the get-go. They've decided they have to control it, and control it quickly and easily. Fans who are caught fighting might have their personal seat licenses and season tickets revoked, which would be a big deal to any fan who's insane enough about football to start brawling with other fans and the police. It stands to reason. If you're the type of person that's going to get into fisticuffs over a football game, then taking those season tickets away, it's going to be rough punishment. And believe it or not, this is not a new idea. Yeah, this is not the first time an NFL team has had a court at a stadium. Now, let's think for a second, if we will, about the reputation of certain NFL fans. Which team would you think needed a court at the stadium most desperately? Do you remember the video after the Super Bowl where a fan of that one particular team in some sort of bizarre celebration got down on the ground and ate horse poop? It's on my blog if you are iron-stomached enough to watch it. But a fan of a certain team after the Super Bowl got down on the ground and in a celebratory manner ate horse poop because, when you feel really good about your team winning the Super Bowl, that's what you do. We are, of course, referring to the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, this is not the first time an NFL team has had a court at a stadium. The Philadelphia Eagles had one at the old Veterans Stadium, which, also makes sense considering, like I said, Eagles fans. Coincidentally enough, Raiders fans were involved in a brawl at a preseason game. Yeah, it's already begun. Raiders fans were involved at a brawl at a preseason game just this past Saturday against the Rams in Los Angeles. So before they're even in Vegas, they are, they're making it extraordinarily well known that the idea of putting both a jail cell and a courthouse at the Raiders Stadium in Los Angeles might not be that bad of an idea. So there we have it. It's been an interesting day. Prince Charles has apparently eaten snacks with Kirstie Alley at Courtney Love's house. The hot new way to relax is listening to police scanners over music, and in a weird twist of fate, defying all the stereotypes about who it is that wants to censor you and censor your thoughts and tell you what you can and cannot think and how you can express them, a Democrat is going after free speech online. It's a strange and odd world that you and I live in, and I'm glad that you and I have this time together every single day to chat about it, because quite frankly, without you, without these talks, without these chats, without these conversations, I would feel a little lost. But it's great that we gather here and we do this every single day, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. Please, if there's anything that you want to talk about on today's show, weigh in at ADSXE. This is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me, ad@iheartradio.com. Thank you so much. Have yourself an excellent one.